Om Apyayantu Mangani Vakpranashchakshushrota Athamidriya Balamidriyani Chasarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuyam Mama Brahma Nirakaro Anira Karnameyastu Anira Karnameyastu Tadatmani Nirateya Upanishadsu Dharma Ste Mai Santu Te Mai Santu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May all my limbs grow strong, so also my breath, my speech, eyes, ears, and all my organs. All is Brahman, of which the Upanishads speak. May I never turn away from Brahman. May Brahman never turn me away. Let there be no turning away, at least on my side. I am engaged in the study of the self. The Upanishads speak of qualities that one must possess to succeed in such a study. May I acquire those qualities? Oh, peace, peace, peace. Okay, so good evening, and we're studying Kena Upanishad. Earlier we did the Katha Upanishad and then the Isha Upanishad, and now we're studying Kena Upanishad, so I'll read the verses we covered earlier. It says, the disciple, by whose will is the mind drawn towards its objects, who makes the vital breath, the first sign of life function, ordained by whom do people utter words, which God directs the eye, the ear, and other organs. The teacher, it is Brahman. It, Brahman, is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the breath of the breath, and the eye of the eye. Therefore the wise, giving up the notion that they are associated with these organs, depart from this world, in other words, renounce this world and become immortal. The eye does not reach there, nor does speech, nor the mind. We do not know how a teacher can possibly explain it to a disciple. We do not know. That Brahman is different from all known familiar objects. It is beyond even unknown objects. This is what we heard from the ancient ones who explained it to us. Know that alone to be Brahman, which cannot be described by speech, and by which speech becomes a vehicle of expression. Yet Brahman is not this sense world that people worship. Know that alone to be Brahman, which the mind cannot comprehend, in which they say makes the mind function. It is not this sense world that people worship. Know that alone to be Brahman, which one cannot see by the eyes, and by the power of which the eyes see. It is not this sense world that people worship. Know that alone to be Brahman, which one cannot hear by the organ of hearing, and by the power of which the ear can hear. Yet Brahman is not this sense world that people worship. Know that alone to be Brahman, which one cannot make an object of smelling by the nose, and by the power of which the nose smells or functions. Yet Brahman is not this sense world that people worship. And here ends the first section of the Kena Upanishad. So this was the first section that we covered. And it's called Kena Upanishad because it starts with the word Kena, meaning by whom. And this is the gist of this first section, is by whom do the eyes function? By whom do the ears hear? By whom does the nose smell? And so forth. And this is a basic concept in Vedanta, in the ancient scriptures, the Upanishad, is that in addition to the body and to the mind, there's a deeper consciousness there. And that consciousness is what makes everything else function. For example, you have a body. It maybe is perfectly healthy, perfectly functional. It can do anything, But if you're asleep, that body will just lay there. Nothing will happen. It requires consciousness to say, to make that body move. So, in the same way you have a mind, but it takes something else that actually makes that mind move. And there's something else is known as the Atman. And the word Atman, it means self because this is the reality of who we are. And basically what we are as human beings, what we are is consciousness. The eternal consciousness, the Chit, the consciousness of Brahman itself, connected with a particular body and a particular mind. And so these, the body and the mind, these are instruments. And through these instruments, we're able to experience the world. We're able to see things and hear things, and we're able to function and do things in the world. And we're also, through our mind, we're able to get some understanding about life in the world and so forth. But the question is, who is using this body? Who is using this mind? Now, the average person, we tend to think just, well, this is me. The body is just it's the body, the mind is just the mind, this is what I am, and whatever I'm experiencing is reality. This is the real world. And for many people, this is the only world that exists. What they experience in the world and their mental reactions to it, whether they like it or don't like it or have different opinions about it, all these things, and their personality. Each person has a certain personality that they project towards other people. But when you go deeper, when you begin to really search to who you really are, you eventually begin to realize that there's something else there. In addition to the body with its physical capacities, in addition to the mind with its intellectual capacities, there's something else there. And when you begin to become aware of that something else there, then you begin to open up the whole infinity of Brahman. Because ultimately, there's nothing but Brahman. The only thing that exists is Brahman. And one aspect of that Brahman is Chit or consciousness. Sat, Chit, and Nada. Existence, knowledge, or consciousness, and bliss. And so, when we go back, well, who's here? Who's aware of all these things happening? What we find out eventually is that what's there, who's there, is actually Brahman itself, is God itself. And so each and every person is a divine being. We're all expressions of the one divine being trying to manifest, express itself in different ways. So behind all the different names and forms, behind all the people, good people, bad people, everything, behind each of them, there's one consciousness there. One part of that consciousness, you could say, operates as me, one operates as you, one operates as you, and like that, behind each different person, there's ultimately, there's a body, there's a mind, a personality, and then there's a consciousness. Now, at the level of the body and the mind, well, that's what we experience. We experience the physical world, and we experience our reactions and thoughts and understanding about that world. But when you begin to go deeper into your real self, then you make this discovery that the self within you, the consciousness within you, which is saying, this is me, that same consciousness is within everything else in the universe. And it's only one consciousness. It's like the ocean. The ocean has innumerable waves, thousands of different waves, big waves and little waves, and all kinds of different shapes, but there's only one ocean there, one water there. Now, as an individual, as a wave, we have a certain shape, a certain size, and we're limited. We're just that particular wave. But when you go deeper and discover that in essence, the wave is water, then you realize, well, water is just water. It's not just the water in your particular wave. That same water is within every other wave. And so this is what we're trying to do, is to grow out of a small, very limited idea of who we are, of what we are, of what everybody else is, and eventually you discover that within each and every individual is this eternal source of all existence. Now, when you think of it from the standpoint of the individual, that this is the self, the reality of a particular individual is called Atma. But that same Atma, when you get to the spirit level, that same spiritual consciousness is equally throughout the whole universe. And so when you think of that reality as the source of the whole universe, it's called Brahman. But actually they're one and the same. Water is water. You know, consciousness is consciousness. It's only when it attaches itself to a particular identity that it becomes limited and that it becomes separate from everything else. And then you live your personal life, and you live your personal existence, and you have ups and downs, and you go through like on the pairs of opposites, good days and bad days, and some success, some failure. And like this, people are kind of stumbling through life and not realizing that all the resources of God Himself are there within themselves. And so this is what all the Upanishads, the message of all the Upanishads is that within you is this reality. The divinity of God Himself is there within you, and you need to uncover it. Now in this first section of the Kena Upanishad, the basic idea, the basic theme of it was, who's behind all this? Who makes the eyes work? Who makes the ears hear? Who makes the nose smell, and so forth? Instead of just saying, well, the eyes are the reality, and therefore we see, and what we see, this is the real world. Instead of saying that, they began to ask, well, who makes these things happen? And then this is gradually leads you back to the realization of Brahman. Now you can kind of approach this reality from two different standpoints. One is the standpoint which is where you study these truths. You study these truths of Scripture, you think deeply on them, and then you eventually reach a point where the realization dawns. If you go on thinking long enough about these things, then eventually kind of a flash comes, and now you know, oh, okay, this is true. I'm actually Atma. I'm actually spirit. But for most people, it tends to be a more gradual approach. That as you go on with your meditation, practice and so forth, slowly you become aware that there's something there. That you begin to feel that you're getting in touch with some deeper presence there. And eventually you gradually begin to learn that that presence is that you're touching, that you're sensing, begins to open up, and more kind of communication, kind of blessing and things begins to come from that, and then eventually you become united with it. You become aware of it in its true knowledge, in its true nature. Now this is what all the kind of spiritual life is about, is trying to attain this direct experience of God. Now for the most part, in many religions, for many kind of religious people, religion is all about going to church on Sunday, behaving yourself, don't sin, don't do this. But the idea of behind Vedanta, the basis of it, is that God, the ultimate reality, is something that can and must be directly experienced. In other words, all these truths are not much help unless they become something you actually experience, that you're actually conscious of. And this is the thing is, we can know these things, and we can agree with it, and say, this is true, yes, I believe in this, but until it becomes an actual experience, you don't get the benefit of it. And also, you don't realize the value of religion, because it's just a set of rules and kind of fun, and they give you some comfort, some sense of, yes, there's a God there who's taking care of things, protecting me, and it gives comfort to people. And because for most people, it gives a feeling that even though I don't know what's going on. There's somebody who knows what's going on. It's all kind of in good hands. But it's only when you actually begin to realize or experience this reality that then the real value, the real meaning of religion comes into play. And so this is why, one reason why Sri Ramakrishna and Hinduism in general has the idea of harmony of religions. It's because they see religion not in terms of organizations, not in terms of I belong to this church and we follow this scripture and practice these rituals and believe this and that, but so much as somehow the individual has to get in touch with this reality within, and somehow he has to experience it. And there can be many different ways of how a person gets there. And so each of the different religions, they're like different roads that all ultimately lead to the same destination. But more than that, each individual, each person is his own religion. Ultimately, each person is on his own path to God. And which church he belongs to, or so these are kind of temporary things, helps along the way. But ultimately, and this is when religion truly begins to become kind of real for the person, is ultimately it becomes something between him and God. And then, and this comes then as God begins to actually unfold, actually become, enter your conscious experience, then the person moves from just being religious to being spiritual. And this is the basis that you find of the saints, the mystics in all the religions, no matter what kind of theology or background they came from. When they get some direct experience, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, all jackals are alike. They all speak the same language, because when God is what God is. We can have all kinds of ideas about God and theologies and things like that, but He's ultimately, God is what God is, and this is kind of the goal is to begin to experience that. It's like in Zen Buddhism. During the Middle Ages, Buddhism became very intellectual. They had a lot of universities and people would write studies and dissertations and things like that. It became a very intellectual kind of thing. But then the cook in one of the monasteries, he put up an edict saying that Buddhism is Buddha's consciousness. It's not ideas about Buddha, it's not ideas about mind or anything else. It's the consciousness of Buddha. This is what Buddhism is. And this idea that real religion, the essence of religion, is the reality of God. And that's what we're trying to see. So in this first section, he begins to look at our ordinary experience, our everyday experience of seeing and hearing things, and ask the question, well, by whom is this done? Who causes this? And so Swami Vivekananda said, that we all live as three different individuals simultaneously. One level, we're a physical being. We have a physical body, we experience the world and see things and hear things and so forth. Also, though, we're a mind. We have a mind, we have a inner awareness and understanding of things and comprehension of things and so forth. And though we also have a spirit, Atman, that real true spiritual nature within us. Now all three of these beings exist simultaneously all the time. But what we become, in actual fact, for practical purposes, depends where we put our attention. If our attention is always on the senses, always on the physical level, then our consciousness, it becomes physical. And we get so absorbed in physical that we can't think of anything else. And so many people are kind of at that level of consciousness, where they primarily are just responding to what they eat or whether they're comfortable or whether it's too hot or too cold or like that. They're just living at almost animal level of existence. Then though, as a person begins to go within, become more introspective, he begins to discover the realm of the mind. That in addition to the body, the physical body, and all its experiences, there's a whole mind which opens up a whole vast realm. For example, a person, a purely physical person, may never set foot in a library. May not be at all interested in school or anything else, and so he lives a very kind of narrow, small type of existence. Whereas once a person has become aware of the mind and begins to experience that, that's something much vaster than just a small existence begins to form, and he then begins to expand his consciousness. So, and this is what I mentioned sometimes that when I was joined the army, went to basic training. I was, went to college and went to basic training, and I never really appreciated much my college education. It was, something you did. You went to high school, and then you went to college. Anyway, but I got to basic training, and for the first time I met people who were really totally uneducated almost. They had just barely finished high school and things. And the thing that struck me is how kind of small their world was. Basically, they knew what was happening to them, but other than that, they didn't know much of anything else. Whereas even my fundamental kind of college education had expanded my mind so that I was aware of other countries, of culture, all these things were there. And so it creates a much richer experience of life. And out of this, all of human civilization, culture has come. Because we're able to tap in to the mind and to access the various laws and things of the universe, we see all the modern technology that's come. But deeper than even the mind and the body is this presence of spirit. And this is the ultimate goal. So as a person begins to meditate now, begins to go within more and more, they may reach a point where you really, okay, the mind is there. It's thinking certain thoughts, it's got certain memories, it's got certain emotions and feelings about things. There's mental activity going on there. But then the question is, who's watching that mental activity? Who's aware of that? And then this is when you begin to sense, this sense of this something else here. Beyond just the physical body, beyond the mind, there's something else here. And then slowly that begins to kind of unfold within you. And eventually you begin to discover that thing, that deeper thing is actually the vast as the whole universe. It's the source out of which everything has come. And it's there actually within you. And if you allow it, it can begin to function in your life. It can begin to guide you, to protect you, to give you a great sense of security and just contentment and happiness as you go through life. And gradually unfold kind of more and more. So this is the basic principle behind this knowledge is that in our real nature, we're the sakshi or the witness. We look out. We see, okay, I'm in this room, I see chairs and things. But who's actually aware of this? Who's seeing this? Who's witnessing this? And then this leaves, is it the eyes that see? Actually, if you look, for example, at sight, what happens is Swami Vivekananda said, there's something out there. And call it X. We don't know what it is, but what happens is somehow, let's say photons or something come, and what happens is that they enter the eye, they enter the retina, they contact the optic nerve, that goes up into your visual center in the brain, and what you actually experience is not that object which is out there, but a reaction that's taking place within your mind. So what's actually out there, you can't really say for sure. All you know is what's happening within your mind. Now, if you're colorblind, you'll look at the thing and you'll see something different. If you're blind, you won't even be aware of it. You won't see it at all. And like if you're a cat, you'll see it all in grays and blacks and whites, and like that, depending on your equipment. But that's what you're actually experiencing is not what the reality is, but what kind of the reaction within your own brain is. So, but even deeper than that, then the question comes: well, then who is actually seeing this? And gradually, instead of seeing the world and thinking of the world as absolute reality, as okay, this is the real world. Instead of seeing things this way, you begin to get a whole new sense of what things are, of what existence is, and eventually this leads you back into this awareness of the deeper self. And this is the principle is that whatever happens, a part of your mind, a part of your consciousness is just there, it's just aware of it. It's just watching it. Now, as you begin to take this kind of detached attitude, then you start to see, experience a different kind of state of existence. For one thing, things in the world don't bother you as much as they did before. Usually if something goes wrong, right away we get upset, or we get worried, or we get frightened, or something, we get very, very disturbed by it. But if you maintain a little detachment and realize, okay, this is not actually happening to me, it's an event taking place, a scene there before me, and I'm just watching it, then things don't disturb you as much. But also, at the same time, you don't get excited when good things happen. It's just, but then gradually though, you start to become aware that there's something else here. There's something else going on. It's not the world, reality is not just what I then experience. Now there's other things going on here. And as you become aware of that, this divinity within, the spirit within, gradually begins to unfold and become part of your life, so that instead of saying, oh, I'm this body, everything that happens to this body is happening to me, you're saying, well, it's happening to the body, but I'm here, and I'm just watching it. Yeah, you can say, mental states come, mental reactions come. Then again, if you say, this is happening to me, it becomes kind of overwhelming. Like a temptation comes, or emotion comes, like anger comes. Normally we say, I'm angry, and then we're kind of overwhelmed by that anger. And we may not express it, but we have to struggle kind of not to. And difficult. But when you say, take the attitude, okay, there's anger in the mind, and I'm just here watching it, then that anger doesn't disturb you. It's there in the mind for a while, and then it goes away. It gradually, you find it like a firm foundation. So whatever's happening externally, whatever's happening mentally, you'll stay calm. Because you're saying, it's not happening to me, it's just kind of a scene there that I'm watching. And this is, ultimately, this is what we are. The world goes on, experiences come, different mental states come, all these things. But all the time, we're actually it's like a movie going on, and we're just seated in the theater, watching the movie, and we're seated in the lap of God. And we get so absorbed in the movie that we say it's all real. And then we get totally kind of absorbed in it, and we can't think of anything else. And then we're kind of confined to the movie and kind of overwhelmed by it. So that when bad things happen, it just drags us way down. And when good things happen, it tends to bring us up, but we're kind of caught in that. And then when we begin to realize that, oh, I'm actually just seated with God. God's with me, I'm with God. We're just sitting here, we're watching the scenes go. The whole thing begins to become transformed. And you begin to realize that the creative source for what's going on in your life is not by trying to change what's going on in your life, is by trying to connect with that deeper consciousness which is actually the creative force behind your life. What we experience in this world, in our everyday life, it's the effect. The cause of that effect is actually lying deeper in consciousness. And the more you approach that inner consciousness, the more you're getting back kind of into control of things, and the more you see things starting to kind of smooth out. So this was the idea behind this first section, is primarily asking the question of who, by whose power do the eyes see and the ears hear and so forth? And the answer is Brahma. Now we also then we went into the second section. And here it says, so after they decided, okay, the power behind everything going on, the power behind all of creation is Brahman, then you go, well, what is Brahman? And first of all, there's a little introductory thing here which says, you cannot know Brahman in the same way that you can know an object. For Brahman is not an object. In the ordinary process of knowing, there are three factors. Deya, what is to be known, or the object of knowledge. Jnata, the knower, and Jnana, the knowledge itself. But Brahman is all of these three in one. So the question of knowing it does not arise. Fire can burn other objects, but it cannot burn itself. Brahman is like that. So the first verse says that if you think, I know Brahman well, then it is for certain that you know little about the nature of Brahman. You know only its manifestation in the individual self, the gods, and the phenomenal world. Therefore, Brahman should still be thoroughly investigated. And the disciple says, I think it, Brahman, is known. So this is the idea, and this is where Vedanta, or Advaita Vedanta, starts to get pretty kind of difficult to understand. Those who say they know Brahman don't know. Those who actually know, they don't say. And in this first verse, it says that, if you think, I know Brahman well, then it is for certain that you know little about the nature of Brahman. You know only its manifestation in the individual self, the gods, and the phenomenal world. Therefore, Brahman should still be thoroughly investigated. The disciple responds, says, I think it is known. He doesn't say, I think I know it. And this is exactly the right answer, because it's not something that I know. It's something that's, Brahman is what it is. In other words, when we say, I know something, we mean that either I've experienced something through the senses, I see that chair, and then I say, I know that chair. Or it's something through the mind, that, okay, I see that chair, I know that chair, and I know how chairs are made. I know what chair factories are like and things like that. Now this type of knowledge, which is either physical through the senses or mental, is one thing, where I'm here and I look at things either physically or mentally and I say, okay, I know that. I know that chair, or I know that idea about a chair, but I'm here and I know that. Now when you get to Brahman though, and what they call the knowledge of Brahman, that I, and again that personal I, it's made up of a body with the senses and a mind with the mind. That personal I is not there anymore. And therefore it can't say, I know Brahman. Brahman is what it is. And this is what, it's not nothing. It's not a case of ignorance, or it's not a case of not knowing anything, but it's simply, it's a different realm of reality that can't be explained to anybody else. And this is what kind of the problem of all the mystics is, that they can't describe to anybody else what it's actually like. It's like, because it's like trying to explain the color orange to somebody who's been blind from birth. how do you say it? What you like? You can say what's a hot color or a warm color or something, but it's really, it doesn't describe it at all. And this is the problem. So they talk in parables and stories and things. But the actual knowledge of Brahman means that consciousness is Brahman. And the only way consciousness is Brahman is if it's not fully identified with the body and mind. As long as we're saying, this is me, it's not Brahman. Yeah. But when you took it through a sense of surrender to God, or in various ways, through the various paths, when you get beyond that sense of this small self, this body-mind self is me, when you go beyond that, then what's there, eventually you discover, is Brahman. But Brahman, a person who's realized this, who's actually experienced, who's actually got the Brahman knowledge, when he's in samadhi, when he's united with Brahman, when he's one with Brahman, for him, this world doesn't exist at all. He's not aware of it. It's totally, and this sounds very strange until you stop to think that every day we go to sleep. We have 8 hours a day. For us, the world doesn't exist. Now, it's true. It still exists for other people, and when we come back, when we wake up, we come back to the world and we say, oh, it's here, it's the same world as it was before. But in samadhi, it's like you're shifting into a totally different reality. And then in that state of reality, the world doesn't exist at all. And that's what Swami Bhashananda did. He was at a university, and there were some philosophy professors there, and they started asking him about what is Brahman's relationship to the universe. And Swami Bhashananda said that Brahman isn't aware of the universe. And it just totally confused him, because we have this basic idea that when we think of God, we think primarily, well, he's creator of the universe. But that's not Brahman. That's a function of Brahman. It's something Brahman does, but it's not Brahman itself. Because he's like a certain person is a teacher. And we say, okay, he's a teacher. That's what he does. He goes to school every day and teaches. But at night, he goes home and he just sits around. He's not teaching or doing anything, he's just sitting at home. And so Brahman is God just sitting at home, just being himself. Now, when you think of the universe and the creator of the universe, well, that's Hiranyagarbha or Ishvara or something, but it's because Brahman is there, it happens, but then you kind of give it a different term, or Shakti or whatever. So, anyway, when a person, like I said, is totally united with Brahman, when his consciousness is completely Brahman consciousness, he forgets completely who his personal self was and the world and everything else. Now, when he comes back out of that experience, to some extent, he can be aware of the world. He can function in the world. He can see people and things, but he no longer sees the world the same way other people do. For him, it's something kind of insubstantial, like a veil that he sees, and realizes all the time that there's nothing but God. There's nothing but this one consciousness. He doesn't react so much in terms of good or bad people, or this or that. He's always aware of what he's seeing is the presence of God, but it's not something that's real for him. Like I said, he can be aware of it, he can function in it, but it's not hard reality like it is for most of us. It's something very kind of flimsy. So this is the idea. Is that when a person says, I know Brahman, oh yeah, I know all about Brahman, it means that he's got a lot of intellectual. He may have read books about Brahman, he may have a lot of intellectual knowledge about Brahman, but that's not the same as knowing Brahman. When the person actually knows Brahman, then he can't describe it. And so he says, he can't say, oh yes, I know Brahman, because Brahman knows him, rather than him knowing Brahman. So then, second verse in section 2, he says, I do not think that I know it well, neither is it that I do not know, nor can I say I know. He who among us disciples knows the meaning of the expression, neither is it that I do not know, nor can I say I know, knows that Brahman. So, a commentary says the statement, Nona Veda iti Veda cha, is very significant. If a person says this, it is to be understood that his knowledge of Brahman is complete. This statement, as we have seen, literally means, it is not that I do not know, nor can I say that I know. If he truly knows, why does he say, nor can I say I know? He says this only to emphasize that Brahman is not an object, like a book or a piece of furniture. An object can be known through the senses, but Brahman cannot be known that way because it is one's own self, one's innermost being. It cannot be perceived in the same way that an object is perceived. To know Brahman means to know Brahman as one's own self. When a person makes an assertion, as the statement implies, it means that he does know that he is Brahman itself. So in other words, the student is saying that, well, I can't say that I know, but at the same time, I can't say that I don't know. Now, there's lots of people that will say, I don't know Brahman, and they don't. But it's the person who knows it, he knows there's something that can't be described as knowledge in the ordinary sense. Well, so just ignorance is not the thing, but it's, although it often, it sounds like, you see, you have in Hinduism, you have the three gurus, tamas, rajas, and sattva. Tamas is the principle of darkness, inertia. Rajas is energy, activity, and sattva is kind of light kind of living in some of a spiritual, kind of more spiritual consciousness, filled with kind of spiritual light. Now, they say that there are two people who can sit quietly in a corner for a long time. One is the fool, who doesn't know anything, who has no energy to do anything, and the other is the sage, who he's got nowhere to go. And so they both look alike. They both sit, they just sit quietly with their eyes closed maybe, but they're totally different in consciousness. So just saying, I don't know Brahman, and isn't the same as the sage who says, I don't know Brahman. That's the difference. And I think I read about one yogi over in India. I don't remember his name, it's an article somewhere. But pretty much his whole life, he just sat and meditated all the time. One time, the river came up, and it was up like over his neck, and somebody dragged him out, and he was just still meditating. And somebody said, well, why don't you do something? You just sit here and meditate all the time. He said, well, you see, I've given my whole mind to God. Where would I go? Where is God? Where would you go to find God? It's like Rabia, the Sufi saying. Some people came and complained that she had her feet facing towards Mecca. And so she said, well, show me where God is, and I'll put my feet there. And so, like that, there was somebody who's attained this higher consciousness. There's nothing for him to do, nothing where to go, because everything is there. He's in touch with the whole thing. And this is the idea of moksha, of liberation, is that as long as we have personal desires, things that we want to get or experience for ourselves, then the soul, the jiva, it goes through different incarnations, different experiences, always kind of seeking one thing after another. But when a person knows Brahman, he's the whole thing. So where would he go? What would he do? Why would Brahman, the source of the whole universe, worry about being a little king somewhere here? And so, like that, this is why the ultimate goal is not to go to heaven, which is also, that's a personal experience, but to realize this ultimate truth, and then you have everything. See, as an individual, as a person, we can be a good person. We can be a very good person, very nice person, or we can also be a bad person, a very bad person. But no matter how good we are, no matter how loving and unselfish and so forth, we're still just a very small individual person. And so, with the best of our knowledge, with the best of our kind of goodness, we can maybe give a little help to other people. But when you know Brahman, you're one with everything. And you're not only are you one person, a nice person doing something nice for somebody else, but you actually are that other person. And so whatever is functioning, whatever is flowing out of that oneness of things. And this is kind of the highest morality that you can have. We in religion, we have ethics, we have morality, and that teach people how to behave and try to be good and don't be selfish and things like that. But spirituality transforms you into something that is inherently good, because it's coming out of the source. But it may not necessarily be good as we would think so from a human standpoint, but it's ultimately coming out of the higher source. So let's see, verse 3 then. It says, he who says he does not know Brahman knows it. He who says he knows does not know. It is known to those who say they do not know it. It is not known to those who say they know it. So when a wise person says that he does not know Brahman, it is to be understood that he knows it. That is to say, he knows that Brahman cannot be known through the senses. In both cases, the verb know is used to apply knowledge to the senses. When an ignorant person says, I know, he is referring only to his sense experience. What he thinks is Brahman is not Brahman at all. He does not even have any idea about the nature of Brahman. But when a wise person declares that he does not know Brahman, he means that he does not know Brahman as an object of the senses. He knows that Brahman cannot be known that way, that it can only be known through a supersensuous experience. This indicates that he knows Brahman. So there's actually, a person can actually attain and live with super consciousness. In other words, we have ordinary consciousness that we go through every day, and there's sometimes you have the tamas, the darkness kind of covered consciousness, dullness there, or you have the sattva, the consciousness full of light. You have these different consciousness, but within each person is ultimately, as the reality of who they are, is transcendental consciousness, which is not the same as your personal consciousness. No matter good or bad, no matter how good a human being you are, it's not the same as transcendental consciousness, which is, some people describe it as fourth dimensional consciousness, but it is a whole different, like I said, a whole different reality, a whole different experience, whole different powers, whole different knowledge, and things come to the person, and then he's no longer is an ordinary human, even a good human. He's now become kind of a realized soul. And this is the thing that once somebody asked Swami Brahmananda, Sri Krishna's disciple, that when people go into deep sleep at night, there's no ego there. And when they go into samadhi, there's no ego there. So he said, well, what's the difference? And Swami Brahmananda said that when a person goes into deep sleep, he goes into fool when he comes out of fool. But when he goes into samadhi, he goes into fool, but he comes out of sage. Ordinary point, there is a state we all go through called deep sleep, where we are go beyond our identification of the body, the non-body, and we go also beyond identification of the mind as we find it in dreams. That okay, I'm mental experience, and you go into deep sleep, and actually that's considered a very high state because you've like gone to a deeper level. But in deep sleep, that experience is covered over by ajnana, ignorance, darkness, and so you go in there and you come out and you say, oh, I don't remember anything, but I felt peaceful. I feel like it's resting. So in samadhi, the person goes beyond that ego state, identified body and mind, but he's now fully conscious. He's in the Brahman consciousness. Within Maya, there's like two powers. One is called the veiling power, and one is called the projecting power. The veiling power covers the presence of Brahman. It covers the presence of like a screen. Like the screen covers whatever's behind it, and then you project any movie you want on that screen. And so the veiling power covers the reality of Brahman consciousness, and then you can experience or project any kind of life you want. You can have a happy life, you can have an unhappy life, you can go to heaven, you can go to hell, you can go all kinds of things. Because once the screen is in, then you can project things. But in samadhi, you go beyond that veiling power, which covers, which is the darkness, that covers deep sleep, and then you find Brahman in all its infinite glory is there. And this completely transforms a person. Whereas before, he could have been the worst sinner in the world, the most awful person in the world. But if he attains that consciousness, that realization, then he's transformed. And now he becomes a sage. And so then this is the idea, is that the Brahman is there, God in all his glory, the God out of which the whole universe, everything is come, and that whole thing, the whole reality is there, and it's there within each person. As we approach it, this individual approaching through our mind and soul, we get a little bit more of a sense of it, more of a glimpse of it. But a person who actually realizes it, he gets the whole thing. And because you're either Brahman or you're not Brahman. If you're Brahman, it's like you're either awake or you're asleep. Now, in our spiritual practices, there's usually a lot of struggle, a lot of effort we have to make. But when you realize Brahman, it's like, well, you wake up, and now you're just awake. That's your natural state. You don't have to struggle anymore. Once you're established, then you don't have to struggle to be aware of it. It's just there. Okay, so we will stop there. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Yeah, okay.
So what extent, okay, I understand that, what our likes and dislikes are, like, it's not us. And there's, like, Atman is Brahman, essentially. But do we have some certain extent of a personality? Like, I know some people are more inclined to be soft, and some people are more inclined to be like not as soft as other people, like gentle. So is there some sort of extent of a personality of your own characteristic that you carry with you that is projected? Or is this once you realize Brahman, or Atman is Brahman, does that completely dissolve?
Yeah. When you fully realize Brahman, when you're totally united with him, there's no personality, good or bad or hard or soft or anything, there's no personality. But when you come back, you will still, the personality will still be what it was, but it will be there as a manifestation of Brahman, and you'll be aware that you're not that personality, you're Brahman. When I first came to Chicago, I had the idea that, okay, all spiritual people, they'd all be holy and pious and this and that. But you find out that every single Swami, every single spiritual, they've got their own personality still. But yet, at the same time, there's a core there that's the same through all of them. And so that whatever it's like when a daisy becomes a perfect daisy, it doesn't become a rose. It is, so each of us is an individual kind of idea in the mind of God, an expression of God. When we actually realize God, now we perfectly manifest what God is trying to express to us. without that realization, we're kind of blocking out that God's trying to express something to us, but we're not letting it happen. And so when you kind of realize that, you become like a transparency for it. So that, but at the same time, though, you always know that even in the midst of things that I'm not really that person, that personality, and so forth. It's just I'm actually Atman. I'll always be Atman, but this is what kind of expresses to us. So sages are really, they can be. Some of them can be kind of irascible. Some of them, they're not just real nice people necessarily. I think they can be, all kinds of different natures.
Okay. I think that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
So anyway, so Swami Yeshapana, he's in New York right now. There's some kind of big program with some Hindu group near New York, and about half a dozen of our Swamis are there, Shantarupan and the other ones. There's something going on. And so he'll be back, but he'll do the service on Sunday. And then we just had a wonderful time with Swami Gautamananda, who was here. Very top Swami, very, very good Swami. And so things are going well. I think the following Saturday, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, the 8th, we will be having our Shivanam here at 6:30 in the evening. Oh, this is important. Starting tomorrow, the Arati switches back to 6 o'clock. There's a time change, comes November 2nd. So starting tomorrow, November 1st, we'll have Arati, instead of Arati at 7, it'll go back to 6 o'clock, but the class time will stay the same, 7:30. And that'll continue up until April 30th, and then it changes again. So, okay, is there anything else? Om Asatoma Savyamya Tamasoma Jyotirgamya Mituramam Amritam Gamya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Oh Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. Oh, peace, peace,